Whilst most of The Song of Ice and Fire has undergone intense scrutiny and theorising by fans of the series, Robert's Rebellion has been largely neglected, aside from the obvious mystery of the child born at the Tower of Joy. This video and subsequent series will attempt to remedy that, analysing what actually happened in the rebellion, the loyalties of different houses, and the politics of Westeros before the rebellion, particularly around the tourney of Harrenhal. Where most people think of Robert's Rebellion, they imagine a map something like the one on the left, and a series of battles something like the image on the right. The aim of this series is to argue that both ideas do not paint the full picture, but they are not necessarily wrong. Whilst the information that we have been given in the series so far would appear to support the two images shown, upon closer inspection, it does become apparent that we are missing some crucial information, particularly about events in the Reach and Stormlands during the rebellion. In order to simplify my analysis of the rebellion, I have broken it down into 4 stages, named after Aerys Targaryen's 4 hands during the conflict: Owen Merryweather, John Connington, Quarlton Chelstead, and Rossart, as well as 2 prequel videos around the politics of Westeros leading up to that point, with a particular focus on Duskendale and the tourney at Harrenhal. I will now go over the events that immediately caused Robert's Rebellion, beginning with the abduction of Lyanna. Rhaegar abducted Lyanna in early 282 AC. At the time, Bran and Lyanna were in the Riverlands in preparation for Brandon's wedding to Catelyn Stark, whilst Rickard was on his way south, Benjen remained in Winterfell, and Ned was still in the Vale. It is important to note that Rhaegar's abduction of Lyanna, regardless of whether Lyanna went willingly or not, is not some tale of true love. However, I will not discuss that further here. Upon hearing of Lyanna's disappearance, Brandon abandoned his journey to Riverrun and instead rode to King's Landing, where he and his companions were imprisoned by the Mad King. Their fathers were summoned to court, and all were executed other than Ethan Glover. This is a good place to begin our analysis of house loyalties during the rebellion. Aside from Braddon and Rickard, Aerys also executed Joffrey Mallister, Kyle Royce, and Albert Arryn, as well as likely some of their fathers, and demanded the heads of Robert Baratheon and Eddard Stark from Jon Arryn. We can therefore be certain that alongside the Arryn, Starks and Baratheons, House Royce and Mallister were rebels. We already know that House Arryn and Royce were rebels, which puts the Eyrie, Bloody Gate, and Runestone under rebel control. In addition, House Coldwater of Coldwater is a vassal to House Royce, which likely leaves rebels in control of Coldwater as well. On the loyalist side, we know that the House Grafton of Goltan and House Corbray of Hearts Hoe were at least initially loyalists, though House Corbray did later switch sides after the fall of Goltan. The houses which were members of Lord Decthront are all almost certainly rebels, which puts House Hunter, Redfort, Waynwood, Belmore, and Templeton on the side of the rebels. We know that there were other Targaryens supporters in the Vale, and as House Corbray and Grafton and Littlefinger backers, it seems likely that House Linderley of Snakewood and House Waxley of Wickenden were also loyalists, though it is impossible to do more than speculate on this issue. We know absolutely nothing about House Melcombe of Old Anchor, and as such, I have left them blank. After the fall of Goltown, as I mentioned earlier, the Corbrays did defect to the rebels, though it seems likely that there did continue to be some support for the Targaryen cause within the Vale for at least the next few weeks of the war. After the fall of Goltown, Robert sailed south to Storm's End, where he attempted to raise his forces to oppose the Targaryens. Robert likely met a region far more hostile to him than he anticipated. While Storm's End and the Stannis remained loyal to him, and his mother's family, the Estemonts, also likely joined him, we know that the Fells, Grandisons, and Catherines remained loyal to the crown, as did the Conningtons. Other likely rebel houses are the Morrigans, who had a dispute with House Connington a few years prior, and the Carons, with a tiny family tree, to the degree where, upon the death of Bryce Caron, there were no uncles who could bend the knee to Joffrey, and instead it was granted to Philip Foote, who had no connection to Carons at all, other than killing Bryce Caron in single combat. This suggests they lost a lot of members in the rebellion, although they did also lose some members in a disease outbreak a few years later. I denoted them as loyalists rather than rebels, as they are Marcher Lords and are therefore likely to anti-Dornish, and the Dornish were significant loyalists. When we look at likely loyalists, who we do not know for certain, the first is the Tarfts, who have a family member at the wall for no discernible reason, whilst having a similarly small family tree, which means that they were almost certainly involved in the conflict. It seems likely that Ray Targaryen married a Tarth, though this is unconfirmed. I label the Tarth loyalist, as their random member of the Wall is similar to Alistair Thorne, Jeremy Riker, and Thorin Smallwood, all of whom were loyalist lords who were sent to the Wall after the fall of King's Landing. House Dondarrion were also probably loyalists. They have a tiny family tree, which, as we have pointed out before, likely means they were involved in the conflict, and as we know, the Dornish army marched up the Boneway, and it is Blackhaven which controls the passage up the Boneway. House Dondarrion seem apparent to have been loyalists, because otherwise they would have been able to contain the Dornish forces within Dorne and stop them from being able to march north. House Selmy do also appear to have been loyalists, if, due to nothing else, the fact that Barristan Selmy seems to hold no ill will to them, though this is a tenuous idea at best. However, I do feel that it is more likely than any other option. House Swan were likely neutral or playing both sides based off their actions in the main series. It seems unlikely they would have done more than offer a token gesture of loyalty to the side they supported, regardless. Other houses such as Mertens, Wild, Penrose, Whitehead, Errol and Buckler lack detail, and as such are impossible to tell. The actual fighting in the Stormlands began when Owen Merryweather, the Hand at the time, convinced the houses of Catherine, Fell and Grandison to march to Summerhall, as it was one of Rhaegar's favourite places to go in Westeros. If Rhaegar was found, he might be able to unify the disparate loyalist forces and crush the rebellion in its infancy. Robert caught wind of the plans and marched to Summerhall to prevent the loyalists from joining together, and defeated each of the lords individually, killing Lord Fell's son and imprisoning the others, as well as the aforementioned son of Lord Fell, who was known as Silveraxe. In the aftermath, Robert returned to Storm's End, where he convinced those lords to join his cause, and was able to rally more men to join him. It seems possible, if not even probable, that at this time houses such as Buckler, Errol and Mertens may have joined his cause, though there is no indication as to which side they supported in the rebellion, if indeed they did take a side at all. Robert's return to Storm's End is indicative of two things. Whilst the fact that he lacked men is certain, and returning to Storm's End to raid more was doubtlessly beneficial, it is not one of the two things that are significant within the grand scheme of the war. The first is that Vale and the North were not yet prepared to move south, into Riverlands where they could possibly join with Robert. This is for two reasons. The first is, as I mentioned earlier, it seems likely that the Vale still had some internal conflict, and it takes a significant time for the North to raise its forces, and they would not have had the necessary time to be able to move south at that juncture when Robert was still in the Stormlands with limited forces. In addition, it does appear likely that the Tyrells had not yet begun to assemble forces, and it does appear that this happened after the defeat at Summerhall. They appear to have been essentially relying on the loyalists in the Stormlands to defeat Robert, and with Robert's victory there, he became a more significant threat, which led to the Tyrells calling their banners to oppose him. In King's Landing, upon the arrival of the news of the defeats at Summerhall, Owen Merryweather was removed from his position as Hand, stripped of his lands and titles, and exiled. Merryweather has failed to contain the rebellion in its infancy, and from there it would only spread. This video focused on the Vale and the Stormlands, as that was where most of the initial conflict in the rebellion took place. The next will focus on the Reach, Riverlands and Crownlands, as that was where the rebellion spread to after its early successes. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you.